Gravy Bones is the most disgustingly fun hero I have ever played in Flesh and Blood. If you like digging through your deck, playing dudes from grave, floating more resources than should be legal, and steering gigantic ghost ships at your opponent's faces, then Gravy Bones might just be the hero for you. In this video, I'm going to go over my personal classic constructed list and then commentate over some gameplay versus another high seas hero, Puffin, to show you just how fair and balanced this deck is in action. But before we get into it, I do have a few quick notes. First, this is not a budget deck tech. This is a tuned list with all of his core majestics and legendaries on the table. That said, if any of you would really like a budget list, leave a comment and I might take a crack at it. Second, while this isn't a budget deck, I did want to keep the price down a little bit since he's quite expensive, and so I avoided generic staples like Command and Conquer and Shelter from the Storm, as well as the Fableds entirely. If you have an eye or the riches, feel free to play them, but I imagine that most people don't, so I wanted to show you that you don't need them for gravy. And third, if you find this video helpful or entertaining, I'd really appreciate the support. You can do so by grabbing yourself some fab dice or a Codex journal like the one I used to help build this deck using the links below. Or you can support me directly by joining the ranks of the Chads over on Patreon. But with that all said, let's take a look at my list after many iterations. Gravy Bones has been an incredibly rewarding hero to tinker with and build for these past several weeks. While my initial builds were incredibly clunky, awkward, and running way too few blues, as I tested and iterated, I started to figure out kind of what makes Gravy tick. I also started to figure out which allies I liked and which I didn't. For example, I made sure to note in my codex just how great Whaler Humperdinck was the first time I actually used him. The thing about Gravy is he's a hero that has a super high ceiling with the allies, but it's locked behind needing to set them up first. Sometimes you'll start off with a great hand that lets you assemble a board turn one, while other times you might durdle around for a few turns before you really get going. The goal with him is to obviously lean into his allies to fill the board and pressure your opponent until they can't clear it, usually ending games by either going wide enough or by going tall with something like Whaler Humperdinck. Either way, Gravy is a deck that needs to constantly draw, discard, generate gold, dump allies, and summon them back. To accomplish this, I've constructed the deck with three separate parts: the engine, crew, and swarm. Playing this deck will mean constantly fueling your graveyard, playing out more allies than the opponent can deal with, and then overwhelming them with a ghost ship full of undead pirates. So let's hop into this super fair and balanced deck that I've been running, starting with the core of it all, the engine. Gravy Bones is one of those decks that, once it gets going, works like a well-oiled machine. But if you falter for a few turns, the game could be over before it even begins. This is why all of our armor is dedicated to the engine of the deck, with Crown of Dominion and Gold-Baited Hook here to generate gold, the Hot Goth Mummy Dead Threads for extra resources, and Mage Master Boots to play an extra ally on our turn. We get practically no block here, but we're prioritizing getting our allies out to soak up damage for us instead. As for the main deck, the most important cards are the Golden Tipples, Portside Exchange, and Chart the High Seas, as they're excellent ways to get our allies into the graveyard, as well as generate gold for Gravy's own ability. But Call to the Grave is the MVP here, as it tutors anything you want right to the graveyard, letting you grab whatever piece you need to most fit your current game situation. However, playing allies can be costly, and so on top of the Dead Threads in the Chart the High Seas, Saltwater Swell and Give No Quarter are excellent options for generating extra resources or reducing the cost of your allies to help bring them back en masse. Of course, to fill the board, you're going to need some action points. The most important card is the Compass, which not only lets you look at the top card of your deck, but also lets you play your first ally from grave with Go Again. On top of that, there's the aforementioned Mage Master Boots, but then there's also Sea Legs and Tip the Barkeep as excellent ways to generate Gold Kiss Rum. Banking one or two of these for later can be very powerful, as it gives us on-demand Go Again at the cost of tapping our hero. There's also one copy of Back Alley Breakline, which gives you an extra action point when it's either put into the grave directly from the deck by a Call to the Grave, or when it's pitched by Chart the High Seas or Saltwater Swell. I swear there is no better feeling than using Compass to find the Back Alley Breakline on top when you have one of those in hand. Getting the action point and 3 free resources? Oh god, I love doing fair and balanced things in this game. It's so beautiful. Getting the deck rolling is the most important part of playing Gravy, and all of these engine cards play a crucial role in this. Being able to dig from both your own cards as well as Gravy's Gravy's ability lets you find your allies and get them into grave, and then the extra resources and action points are how you flood the board and swing wide with them. Of course, Gravy Bones has a huge selection of undead he can enlist, so I think it's time to actually take a look at the allies that I have chosen to be a part of the crew. Gravy Bones' allies are definitely the biggest draw to him as a hero, and they range in power anywhere from the Chad Humperdinck to Kelpie. In this build, I've got a grand total of 15 allies, which is the amount I have found feels best. You want to see them pretty frequently, but not have hands full of them all the time, or really at all, so a quarter of the deck is where I landed. Starting off, we have Rigamortis and Swabby, which are simply generic beat sticks, swinging for 6 and 7 respectively. While they lack any other abilities, they make up for it by just swinging for a lot. Sawbones and Anka are a big step up from them though, as both can be played and attack off of a single blue pitch, but also have very powerful abilities. Sawbones can prevent damage to both you or an ally, which stacks if you get multiple on board. Anka, on the other hand, can discard an ally to force your opponent to discard as well the next time they draw during their action phase. This is great for countering things like Mask of Momentum, Death Dealer, or even Gold. As for our more costly allies, there's Chum and the one main deck Whaler Humperdinck. Chum costs 4, which is where Dead Threads comes in handy, and for that many resources you get a 4 power, 6 health ally who swings for free and has the ability to discard other allies to force your opponents to attack him. Chum can completely soak up everything an opponent might want to do for their turn, saving both your life total and your other allies. He is really good. As for Whaler, well, he's an 11 power, 7 health ally. Dude just wins games on his own. In fact, if you're facing a slower hero where you have time to set up, and spoiler alert, you can bring the other 2 from the sideboard in and use 2 Give No Quarter to drop 2 Humperdinks in a single turn, which usually just wins the game on the spot. While it might look like only 15 allies isn't that much at the start, the fact that they don't block nor do they have go again from hand is why you don't want to have too many. This is why the engine part of the deck is integral, as you really do need to be sifting through your deck to make sure you not only see your allies, but get them into grave to summon out. But once you've assembled your crew on deck, you need a way to actually close out the game and swing with more than just one a turn. So now it's time to look at how we actually punch through to our opponent in the final part of this deck, the Swarm. While filling the arena with powerful allies is great and all, it's meaningless unless you can send more than one attack. The Swarm part of this deck is the key to pressuring the opponent, especially in the endgame, where you just need 1 or 2 damage to finish things off. Starting with the ally enablers, to swing with multiple of them, you can lean on the Gold Kiss Rum you've hopefully been generating throughout the game, but then there's also Avast Ye and Flying High. Being blues, you can pitch them when they aren't useful, saving them for later in the game when you need to close things out. In a similar vein, there's Loot the Hold, which, while not giving go again, does disrupt your opponent's hand and buys you an extra turn to keep digging. Of course, our allies aren't the only source of go again, as we also have attacks like Golden Tipple and the Saltwater Swells to chip in damage late game, and this is more impactful than you might think at first, but to add to those, we've got Ravenous Rabble's more civilized sibling, Murderous Rabble, which typically swings for 3 go again. However, small attacks aren't exactly impressive, and no pirate captain would be complete without his fleet, so we're also running 2 boats. The almighty Conqueror of the High Seas, and me! Both Conqueror and Swiftwater Sloop have High Tide, meaning that if you've pitched 2 blues, they get go again, as well as +1 in the Conqueror's case. Obviously, Conqueror is the card for this deck. I mean, it's 8 go again, destroy the arsenal on hit, and make a gold. I don't think I need to explain why that's good, and why you should absolutely be sending this card whenever you can. But with these 2 boats rounding out the Swarm section, that will be it for the main board. Again, you want to use the deck engine to get your allies in grave, make some gold, dig through the deck, and maybe set up some rum for later. Then, after getting some allies to stick on board, you want to use the Swarm cards to have chains wide enough to actually kill your opponent. And in the meantime, your giant ships paired with an ally attack can hopefully force your opponent to block a bit on some turns, giving you a bit more time to do all this. However, before I jump into some gameplay, I will quickly go over my current sideboard. This is highly subjective, but currently I've got Blood in the Waters for some some extra defense against things like Ranger, Limpets for slower matchups that can't clear the board well like Guardians, 1 Morela Fae to further punish decks not clearing the board, 2 more Humperdinks to overwhelm defensive decks, and 3 Sunken Treasure, which is very strong against the mirror. It hinders assassins and rangers playing Codex of Frailty, and can even generate gold off your own sea legs and grave. After that, I've got just a couple no room pieces and the quick dodge flexors, mainly for ninjas like Syndra, since you really won't have time to set up with the Mage Master boots, and instead you're just gonna have to cling to dear life. Actually, I want to quickly mention Syndra here, as she is one of your worst matchups as Gravy. She is able to clear your board turn after turn and still deal damage to you, and as I was testing and refining the deck, I lost to her multiple times. You absolutely can beat her, and I have done it off camera, but it's such an uphill climb. And this kind of goes for any aggressive deck, honestly. Gravy doesn't block amazingly, and if you don't draw the nuts on your first or second turn, you can sometimes just get rushed down immediately. In fact, let me just talk real for a moment. Gravy Bones is a fair and balanced hero in that he has incredibly high ceilings and can pull off some just crazy good turns. On top of that, having bodies on board is just really strong in Flesh and Blood, but he's not broken in that he has no counters. Some graveyard removal or decks that can rush him down definitely do keep him in check. But into a lot of heroes, Gravy feels amazing. If your opponent takes time to clear the allies, you just get to set up more. But if they ignore the allies and go face, you can slowly but surely whittle them down while blocking with most of your cards. And if you set up enough, you can do some really gross things by just pitching to multiple gold to dig for the right cards to have those incredibly fair and balanced turns and completely blow your opponent out of the water. Simply put, Gravy struggles when a hero can deal with allies and pressure his life total, but any hero who can do only one or the other on most turns is where he shines. And keep in mind, this is still a pretty early build for the deck, so chances are, as both myself and the rest of the community work on the hero, he may develop as a deck that can offset some of his own weaknesses. But I've yapped on about this enough. I have played a few games with this deck on camera, so let me show you the one with this version of the deck that I think highlights Gravy Bones' strengths best. Puffin is the other hero from High Seas that I'm somewhat interested in, but I'm not really sure if I'll ever get around to playing considering how obsessed I've been with Gravy. That being said, my buddy Joe is a total Chad and was more than willing to throw a deck together and come to my place so we could play this game. Although he forgot that he needed a proxy of Cogworks Tinker Rings, and we were already all set up to record when he realized it, so that's what the card back is, just so you know. But his deck is a pretty stock Puffin list, relying on playing Cogs to power his skyships, and being a mechanologist, I know that this is going to be an aggressive matchup. That being said, I think that my main deck is good enough to deal with this, so I opted not to sideboard, and we begin the game. Winning the dice roll, Joe chooses to go second, letting me have a free setup turn. Except I've got no allies in hand, so I use my compass and thankfully see a chum on top. Using Gravy, I draw the chum, discarding Murderous Rabble instead. This lets me play a blue golden tipple, now discarding the chum so that I can make a gold and draw a card. Joe blocks the 1, and then I play the chum out of grave and swing for 4, which connects. Turns out, thanks to items, Puffin is also capable of drawing a hand of non-blocks as well. Passing it over, Joe plays a Copper Cog and Polycranka, cranking both and drawing off of Puffin's ability. Sends a Cogwork Zeppelin at chum, killing him, and then he simply arsenals and passes. Thanks to him just clearing chum, I'm able to keep all of my cards, sending the blue golden tipple I had put in my own arsenal at Polycranka, discarding a Whaler Humperdinck. I then make a rum with Tip the Barkeep and follow it by using my Dead Threads and another blue to play the Whaler out just as a body to buy me some more time, since unfortunately I'm not finding many of my allies. Joe starts his turn by transforming a gold into a golden cog and then plays a gold wing turbine for a second one, drawing a card. A red sky skimmer that's buffed with a gold wing turbine is exactly enough to kill Whaler, sending the one of Big Boy to his watery grave very early into the game. So while he did buy me a turn, it does mean I won't have him as a win condition later. Joe follows that by sending a Cogwork Zeppelin at me, threatening to make another cog on hit. He also explains that he can tap a cog to give it +1, and he very clearly has enough to pump it to 7 and make another one. So like the genius I am, I block for 6, not using my hook to block for 7, and he immediately pumps it up. Listen, I could try and explain this away by saying, oh, this is my first time facing Puffin, but I literally blocked right after he explained what the card did, so not only can I not read, I also can't listen. Thankfully, that's the rest of his turn, and so on mine, I get to start with one of the best engine cards, Portside Exchange. I discard an Anka, make a gold, and draw. Then I use the compass to follow that with Gravy's ability to draw and discard the sea legs on top of the deck for a second rump. I then make a bit of an odd play using the give no quarter for its ability, playing the Anka, then using loot the hold and my dead threads to send it and threaten his hand. I'd say this is odd because I could have just accomplished all this by just pitching the give no quarter, but whatever. Joe has a great response though, blocking with his legs in a golden Sky Warden, popping his used golden cogs and turning them into gold instead, as well as fully blocking Anka. I pass the turn over and Joe melts another gold into a cog and then plays a copper cog, cranking them both. In response to this though, I toss a Sawbones to Anka's ability, forcing him to discard, essentially negating the draw. However, Joe still has a great hand. He sends a red T-Bone, which I just take, but it forces me to block with an equipment, so I just throw out my Mage Masters. And then he follows the T-Bone with a Palantir Aeronaut. And with a whole bunch of untapped cogs and a ship that forces me to block with another equipment and can pop it, I'm forced to decide whether I want to lose my dead threads or my hook. While the extra resources from dead threads is incredibly strong, I ultimately decided that it was the piece to give up because while I could still make do with resources from hand, I needed to keep up on the gold generation or my deck would grind to a halt. Joe pumps the Palantir to 9, destroys the Hot Goth Mommy, and I go down to 27. I start my turn with the compass and use Gravy's ability to get another sea legs off the top, making my third run. I then decide that with a Call to the Grave in hand, it was time to make a very annoying board state. I use it to go grab a chum, then pitch 6 to play him and the Sawbones I previously discarded. And with the board now full of powerful allies but no action points, I pass it over to Joe, feeling relatively safe for the time being. After losing the old cogs, Joe sends a soup up for 4 go again at my face rather than my allies. And this is where I realize that he's probably going with the strategy of rushing me down rather than clearing my board. This means that I need to quickly pivot my strategy to maintaining my life and grinding him down rather than digging for more allies. To help with this, I take the opportunity to use Chum, redirecting his next attack. Joe does the gold cog draw play and then uses a Cogwork Zeppelin to kill my chum for 7, getting past the Sawbones prevention, and he passes turn. With 3 cards in hand and 2 strong allies still on board, I felt that I was in a very good spot despite being at a 13 life deficit. This is because in my hand is a glorious, majestic boat, and even though Joe doesn't have an arsenal, it's still 8 go again. Joe takes it, going to 28, and with 2 resources floating and my hero untapped, I take a swig of rum to swing an Anka for 5 and a Sawbones for 6. Joe blocks 2 with his chest and goes all the way down to 19. After managing the cogs, Joe plays a boom grenade and claps back with a Cogworks Dovetail that has the ability to pump itself. I block for 7, banking on the Sawbones activation, so Joe gives it go again instead and sends a Jolly Bludger for 5 overpower. And it has an extremely nasty on hit that will take my items. Not wanting to give him the gold, I go ahead and use Gravy, then prevent 1 with the Sawbones. This means I take 4 from the Bludger and 4 from the Boom Grenade, handing my precious booze over. What an asshole. As the turn is passed back to me, I am now feeling much less secure, and all I can do is play a Call to the Grave to grab a second Sawbones and swing with it for 6. Passing it back to Joe, he starts with a cog in the machine, only cranking 1 golden cog to avoid Anka. He then makes a 3rd with the Gold Wing Turbine, following it up with a T-Bone for 6. With my life dwindling, I knew that I had less and less freedom to take hits, but I had a really good hand, so I give him the hook, which is already blocked, and use both my Sawbones to only take 4. Joe then finishes his turn with his Spitfire for 3, also at me instead of the allies, and this is awesome. He definitely should have removed the Anka here, but I think with me getting so low in life, he was just trying to get me into a spot where I'd have to give up my entire hand to block turn after turn. Unfortunately for him, that was not this turn. I start with a red golden tipple, chipping 3 damage, then I pitch a second blue and send another boat for 8 go again. He still doesn't have an arsenal, but I don't care. We're now both low on life and the damage alone is incredibly threatening. But Joe just takes it, likely realizing that he also needs his cards for a final push, but I get to end my turn with the Anka he should have killed. Joe now has to block, so he does so for 4 and takes 1, leaving him at 2. all I have to do is withstand this next turn, and I should be able to put enough pressure on him to lock this game down. Another cog in the machine makes 2 more cogs, and when he cranks a second, I discard a rigor mortis to Anka. But then I have to contend with another Jolly Bludger coming at my face. For the first time ever, I'm actually glad I didn't make any gold, because this is now just pure damage. With Overpower, I can only throw 3 in front of it, and Joe uses his unicycle to pump it up, bringing me to 4. He then sends his Spitfire at my face again for 3, which I block with the Me Boat and a Sawbones Prevention, staying at 4, but with only 1 card left in hand. Thankfully though, Allies on board is incredibly fair and balanced. While most decks can maybe swing 4 with a single card, I've still got a Sawbones untapped, so I pitch my last card and swing for 6. And with Joe at 2, he's forced to give me 2 cards to stay alive rather than just 1. Untapping my undead army, I pass it back to the man who still won't clear my board as a 0 to 60 comes at my face with Go Again from a rum. Joe then does something that I didn't catch until watching the replay, and I honestly can't understand. He uses the second rum he'd stolen from me, which he actually can't because Puffin should be tapped, and then just sends a Sky Skimmer as his final attack, meaning that the rum wasn't only illegal but also pointless. Honestly, I think he was just trying to waste it to get it off his field, but I don't know. I block for 4 with a card in Sawbones, and as it's passed back to me, I'm left with 2 cards that will seal the fate of this game. I have an Avast G and a second blue, meaning that I can swing both Sawbones and Anka for 11 and take at least 3 cards from Joe's hands, as well as his totally real Cogworks Tinkerings. This very simple and extremely obvious line is the exact thing I needed to swing the game completely in my favor. Except instead of doing that, I get greedy and play Chart the High Seas, knowing that I was hitting an ally on top, but certain that there would be a blue underneath. And was there a blue underneath? Nope, another ally. So now I have to pitch the Avasti to draw from a gold, and I draw a second one, which I also pitch to my final gold, and I draw a Rigor Mortis. Instead of taking 3 cards from Joe's hand, I've wasted all my gold, and I'm forced to pitch the Rigor Mortis to play a chum and swing for 4, which Joe blocks with 1 card and his totally real Cogworks Tinkerings, making a golden cog and keeping 3 cards in hand. Okay, pause here. This was such a bad throw. I already had 3 allies on board. I had revved my engine. I assembled my crew. My goal was to now swarm. I need to be attacking as much as possible to keep up the pressure. He's at 2, and if I can keep 3 cards and a couple allies, I should be able to make a chain wide enough to kill him. There was absolutely no need to use Chart the High Seas, and now I could very well die if he has a good hand. Thankfully he didn't, and after he attacks, I'm still alive with enough cards to swing an ally, but here's the thing. Because I didn't take all of his cards, we have now entered a state of the game where for 5 whole turns, we literally just throw an attack at each other and block with 2 to 3 cards. I'm not joking. That is all we do for 5 whole turns. Like, what is this? I can't make content out of this. This is boring. So we're gonna fast forward through it because you came here to see Flesh and Blood, not 2 grown men playing footsies with each other. But here's the thing. Even though I made a terrible play, Gravy Bones and the allies are so insanely fair and balanced that it doesn't even matter. Because I can swing for 5 or 6 with 1 ally, Joe has to give me at least 2 cards each time. This means that he can't have huge turns to send at me, and so I'm able to block everything but 1 card for pitch, staying alive and giving me time to wait for the right turn. And even though we slog through those 5 turns, I'm finally able to break this parity once I see some Go Again. And after giving up my excess life, it's finally time to start ending this game. I start with the Golden Tipple, taking 1 card, discarding an ally, and drawing a Portside Exchange, which is bound for my arsenal. I finish by swinging with Anka, taking 2 more cards from his hand, and now I have finally done what I should have 5 turns earlier, leaving him with only 1 card. And with him just playing the Copper Cog and swinging for 2, I am able to keep my entire hand, arsenal, and 2 untapped allies that can attack. I start with the Portside Exchange, discarding Sawbones, then I play a Tip the Barkeep for the rum that I need to get the Go Again. And as it is, if I were to just use the Murderous Rabble in hand as well as swing 2 allies, I could end the game here. But I decided that no, just winning wasn't enough. I had to go out of my way to show just how over the top Gravy Bones could get. Because not only did I still have my Mage Master boots, I also had a Give No Quarter. So while I absolutely did not need to, I decided to resurrect some more of my crew just for the funsies, bringing back Swabby and my 3rd Sawbones. Just look at that board state. Now this is flesh and blood as James White intended it. Anyways, it's finally time to stop messing around and win the game. I use my rum to swing Sawbones for 6, with the plan to also send the Murderous Rabble as well as Anka, but it turns out Joe has 2 non-blocks in hand, so he just concedes before I can do anything else. I really do think this game against Puffin is a testament to how powerful the allies really are if they're not easily cleared. I think Joe made the right decision going at my face the whole time, but I do think he should have at least cleared the Anka when it was my only untapped ally. But it really is a tricky situation, because if I don't have to block, I can use my hand to pressure back and assemble more allies. But not clearing them means that, sure, I have to block, but then I still have something to swing back with. And a big part of Gravy's strength is forcing your opponents to make these sorts of hard decisions throughout the game. Chances are, a lot of people are going to make the wrong call at least once. But that turn where I got greedy with the chart was such a bad misplay. Do not do what I did. If you can attack with both allies late game and take multiple cards from your opponent, do it. Do it. Don't gamble on there being a blue as your second card of the deck like I did. There was a very real chance that leaving Joe with 3 cards could have cost me the game right then and there, and I got a little lucky that he wasn't able to blast my ass completely. That said, dude, this deck is awesome. I love playing allies and digging through the deck. There's something so satisfying about getting to do a bunch of stuff in one turn, and I really enjoy the flavor of all the allies, as well as the fact that some of them have like really powerful abilities. Having a mini ALS, negating draw, and preventing damage are all so freaking strong and can do a ton of work into different matchups. And I didn't even get to show you some of the huge go-off turns he can have out of nowhere by just like drawing from a bunch of gold. Like this deck's ceiling is so freaking high, but it's kind of balanced by the fact that, you know, if you draw like 4 allies in a hand, you know, the floor is also incredibly low. However, for the sake of not making this video an hour long, I think I'll leave it here. I hope you found this video both educational and entertaining, and maybe it even convinced you to make Gravy your main as well and put some money into the deck. Thank you all very much for watching, and an extra special thanks to all of my Chadley patrons. You guys are honestly the best. Huge shoutouts to the Giga Chads Geeks First, Elixir, Vinny, John, Ty, Chemical, Bryant, Dark Memoria, and Big Hungry. Then we've got the Alpha Chads, Thomas, Zajima, and Approximo, and then there's the Super Chads, Cece, Ben, Yogbadoodles21, Kevin, and Wolf Shadowmancer. Thanks again as always, and stay Chadley, my friends.